David Boies deployed Black Cube on these journalists that were writing an article on Harvey Weinstein. And they were just looking for dirt on them that they could use to dissuade them. They're retired Mossad agents.
Only Mossad agents.
I think they're out of Israel, so they might be other type of Israeli intelligence agents, but definitely retired Mossad. And they do dirty deeds, but they don't do dirty deeds done dirt cheap. I think they charge an exorbitant amount for them. And we've got David Boies using Black Cube to protect Harvey Weinstein, and the same guy is one of the architects of the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, which...
We have a subscription account. It's on Patreon. We give them the opportunity to ask a question to each guest. So this is from Tyler Studd. Despite significant evidence, figures such as Sarah Kellen have not faced the same level of prosecution as Ghislaine. What systemic issues in the legal system prevent these individuals from being held accountable, and what reforms do you believe are necessary to address this?
The New York Times did an article on 6 Epstein procurers, aka pimps, and Maxwell was the leading one, but right below her was Epstein's number 2 lieutenant, Sarah Kellen. This woman has led a lot of lambs to the slaughter. Child trafficking is 15 to life, and Maxwell only getting 20 is a joke. But with Kellen, she should also be in prison with Maxwell. The government has been completely unwilling to prosecute the procurers and the perpetrators in the Jeffrey Epstein network.
Why do you think the media is so hesitant to cover this shit? Are they pro-sex trafficking? Is that what it is? They like child sex trafficking?
Anything that's salacious with Epstein, the media will talk about. But when you try to get into justice, the media won't go there at all.
So the mainstream media, they don't want any justice for these victims.
No. I mean, it's so bizarre to me that you've got the mainstream media out there, and none of them are screaming for justice. Jeffrey Epstein trafficked underage girls for 25 years.
What is the youngest girl on record that he trafficked?
So on record, it's 13. The cover story is 14, but there were girls younger than actually 13.
Shit.
I got to a blackmail photographer who was part of the Franklin trafficking network. I was trying to figure out so much stuff, and I asked him about the blackmail angle. He said, to me, it's like you're on a yacht. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful yacht, it's a beautiful day, and you can have anything you want on the yacht. But if you decide to get off the yacht, the people on the yacht are going to make sure that you drown. There's already footage of you. You're part of that club. There's almost an incentive to keep going with it. I mean, you're not going to stop. There's already footage of you. You're part of that club. You're part of that omerta where you're going to keep your mouth shut and do what you're told.
How many names were in that book? Do you remember?
A bunch of them, but not all of them were pedophiles.
Yeah,
but
how many were clients? Estimation.
Probably 50 or 60.
50 or 60?
Yeah, and I could be wrong. There were a number of names that were circled.
Do you think Epstein killed himself?
To me, that's kind of like a red herring, because the most important thing with Epstein is that the government is covering up child trafficking, and all these perpetrators have molested all these little girls with impunity. And I think that his death is a way to steer people away from that. And there was so much media on Epstein that he could not be a blackmail artist. If everybody knows that his homes are equipped with audiovisual surveillance and he's got young girls, people are not going to wander into that honey trap. And the same thing happened with Spence. But both of them had a tremendous amount of media on them. Now, Spence killed himself. People think that he was suicided. My take on Spence is that he was given the choice. Either you can kill yourself or we can kill you. He checked into the Boston Ritz and he wore a tuxedo and he took an overdose of nortriptyline, which is an antidepressant. I've kind of come to think that Hollywood and Washington, D.C. have a certain kind of person.
Gee, I wonder what leads you to believe that.
But it's kind of interesting. Both people in Hollywood and D.C., it's a power thing. They have a tremendous amount of power. People in Hollywood have the power to really sculpt Americans' attitudes about a lot of different things. And of course, people in Washington, D.C. have the power to make laws. And we've got David Boies using Black Cube to protect Harvey Weinstein, and the same guy is one of the architects of the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, which really shows pretty much right out of the gate that something is seriously awry with the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund.
Yeah.
P. Diddy has been getting away with all kinds of stuff. There was that shooting that he walked from. Shine took the fall for it. And we've seen some clips of him beating on women. I mean, that's pretty standard operating procedure for him. But now there's 8 lawsuits that have been filed against him for sexual assault. 2 of the women that are suing him were minors when he molested them. And he molested them in a very brutal manner. And then the 5th lawsuit has been filed by Little Rod, who also claims that he was sexually assaulted. But Little Rod said that P. Diddy was trafficking minors, too. So we've got 3 accounts of P. Diddy trafficking minors. And his houses in L.A. were searched, in Miami, and there was hidden cameras. P. Diddy had freak-off parties, a bacchanalian orgy, essentially. And politicians went to those parties. Celebrities went to those parties. Sports stars went to those parties. Hidden audiovisual blackmail thing going on, like Epstein, like Craig Spence. Because P. Diddy dealt with some unbelievably powerful people. Can P. Diddy blackmail those people by themselves? Or is he blackmailing for some kind of covert entity? But the fact that we got Damian Williams overseeing his investigation, there were so many sexual assault lawsuits getting filed against him that something had to be done. And all this was coming out about his beating up women. And there was a president of Bad Boy Records that he took a baseball bat to. I mean, he's just a nasty piece of work. And I think it reached a critical mass where something had to be done. So call in Damian Williams. He's covered up Epstein. Now he's going to be covering up P. Diddy. I have seen these pedophile networks, the Snow Killings. It was a huge pedophile network. And Francis Sheldon was a wealthy guy, and he ran it. And he bought an island. This was like an Epstein island before Epstein. And he would fly kids to the island where they'd get molested, and he'd make child pornography. And there were 4 kids that were dumped on highways or roads within like a 11-month period of time. The killings were pinned on Christopher Bush. And Christopher Bush ostensibly committed suicide, but there was no blood splatter. I mean, the whole thing was really poorly staged as far as like suicide. It was kind of a ramshackle exploit. Francis Sheldon, nothing ever happened to him. He went to Amsterdam, and then he ultimately ended up at an orphanage in India where he could molest kids to his heart's content. His head of security, Fareed Muhammad, was the head of security for Michael Jackson. So there's a guy that knows how to keep secrets.
Man, these aren't coincidences.
You reach so many coincidences that, what can you extrapolate? And he's also a great fixer. He's got really good connections in the Los Angeles Police Department and LA Sheriff. The kind of connections that would enable someone who is shot at point blank range, and then it's reported that they're shot by a drive-by shooting. Little Rod, in his lawsuit, says that one of the rappers had a fight with P. Diddy and his son, and they went into the bathroom and shots rang out. The rapper was shot, and P. Diddy told Little Rod and some other people to move him outside of the studio and say that he'd been hit by gunfire from a drive-by shooting. And actually, it was reported in L.A. that he was hit by gunfire from a drive-by shooting. So you've got these 2 dynamics with Watergate. You've got the CIA wanting to take the Nixon administration down, and then you've got this brothel that's connected to the DNC, that's a CIA honey trap. John Dean, who is one of the heroes of Watergate. John Dean is right up there with Woodward and Bernstein when it comes to lies. But John Dean's wife, Maureen Dean, worked for a woman named Heidi Reichen. And Heidi Reichen ran a brothel that was a block away from the Watergate. And if you were a Democratic big shot, you go to it. There's a secretary named Maxie Wells at the Democratic National Committee. You would go to her, and she would provide you like pictures of the prostitutes. And you would choose the prostitute that you liked, and then you would go to the Columbia, and then you'd have a liaison with the prostitute that you liked. But the CIA was filming it. It was run by McCord, that particular honey trap.
I haven't seen one person on the left say, this is up. No. You know what I see? I see a bunch of complicit people. Maybe they're complicit because they want that to happen. I'm not trying to polarize anything here. I'm just calling out what I see. And what I see is the left not doing anything to protect kids. We are doing sex changes to 8-year-olds. We are calling pedophiles minor attracted persons. And I don't see anybody, and not one person on that side of the aisle doing a damn thing about it. In Washington state, the state can take your kid. If you do not want them to get gender affirming care or something, that got voted in.
I live in New York City, which is kind of the epicenter of liberalism. And most people that I know that are on the left think it's completely insane.
Then how does this stuff keep passing?
In 1967, there was a huge backlash against the Warren Commission report, and a lot of people weren't buying it. So the CIA came out with a dispatch, and it said that the people who don't believe in the Warren Commission, we're going to call them conspiracy theorists. And then it gave a number of rationales why conspiracy theorists are conspiracy theorists. The New York Times and the Washington Post use the word conspiracy theorist about once a year prior to that 1967 dispatch. But after that 1976-7 dispatch, the term conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist just shot up exponentially in both papers. So people just automatically think of something, and they go, oh, conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
They're drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
They have no idea that they're drinking the Kool-Aid.
Very interesting to see how easily people get sucked in.
The FBI had a program called COINTELPRO, in which it completely trampled on the rights of Americans, open mail. And during this period, a letter was sent to Martin Luther King, who was about to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And I think it had like some tapes of King having an affair. And the letter, which I believe was written by William Sullivan, told King that he needed to commit suicide before he accepted the Nobel Prize, or these tapes would come out. COINTELPRO was really nasty, especially like with the American Indian movement and also the Black Panthers. And there's evidence that COINTELPRO definitely contributed to the death of Fred Hampton, who was a Black Panther in Chicago. But there was a member of the American Indian movement named Emery Aquish, and the FBI floated information that she was an informant, and she was murdered by two members of the American Indian movement because they thought she was an informant.